Welcome everyone. I'm Rabbi Salston. Everyone would please take a moment to silence your cell phones. Assuming the leadership of Temple Beth-El, which Rabbi Gary Creditor led for 21 years, is a humbling honor. On the Shabbat that I arrived in Richmond for my interview, I remember meeting Rabbi Creditor in our backstage L'chaim lounge. And I was struck by how involved and connected he remains as Rabbi Emeritus. Then, even before I moved to Richmond, he and Ruby reached out to me and invited me to Shabbat dinner my first week in town at the beginning of July before anyone else knew I'd arrived, 2 weeks before my moving truck even arrived. He picked me up at the door in the car before Shabbat began and walked me home that night. We talked for hours. He and Ruby told me about their children and grandchildren and how happy he was to be spending the summer at TDE, filling in for me, giving Divrei Torah before I officially started. He mentioned that his son, Rabbi Menachem Creditor, was going through his files and digitizing his writings. I was impressed, but I didn't think much more about that conversation until this winter. When Rabbi Menachem Creditor emailed me a few months ago, he told me he had published more than 400 of his father's sermons in these books that you have with you. At that point, I was incredibly impressed, but not surprised. When I officiated my first funeral at TDE, Rabbi G. Creditor had told me to find the Hebrew names from the files in Norma's office. Rabbi Gary Creditor did his work by collecting longitudinal files on families that are still in filing cabinets in this building, including every time someone sent him a Times Dispatch article about their granddaughter and the like. Beyond the incredible words Rabbi Creditor has shared with this community through the past 4 decades, which you all and the world now have perpetual access to. Know that he gave these words as the rabbi who loves his shul, and in the words of someone at Kiddush just yesterday, in the positive sense, a rabbi who knows everything about everyone. It's truly my honor to sit in his chair and continue sharing love and Torah with this community. I'm grateful to have a mentor I can still partner with, wave hello to his class, to his back, when I come through the front door on Tuesdays at lunchtime during his Talmud class, and share meals with our Havara. Rabbi Menachem Creditor, when we were planning this, told me he wanted to do this event as Kibud Av, the Torah commandment to honor one's father. And I said, we all need to do Kibud Rav, honoring our rabbi. I would invite you all, if you're able, to perform the honorific to scholars and leaders. I invite you to stand, if you're able, before our rabbi, our teacher, Rabbi Gary Creditor. Thank you. And we are honored to welcome his sweet son and our colleague, Rabbi Menachem Creditor. Thank you.
I am so deeply touched to be here with you, mostly to be here with you, and to Rabbi Salston, my deep, deep thanks. Having been a successor to other rabbis in other places I've been, it takes a certain kind of leader to know that this is such mutual strengthening. Thank you for knowing that Torah is bigger than any of us, which is actually in the core of my father's message in the world too. I wanted to take this moment before I ask my father questions to acknowledge certain moments that have brought me into this specific dimension of our relationship. I'm going to have my father read in a second. Just a few paragraphs that he wrote. because it's a little bit funny to have a book that you didn't plan on writing, but you did keep really good notes. And you kept the records of the Torah that you taught, never assuming that they would be bound like this or available and disseminated, let alone I'd encourage you to look around the room and see the love in people's eyes as they hold a hefty artifact of your Torah. I didn't want to be a rabbi for a while because I didn't know that I had it in me. I know that a lot of rabbis have that feeling, especially early on. But what I had that most of my classmates and colleagues did not is the confidence of knowing that there is something that matters, that we can talk about. Whoever the we is and whatever the what is. I had a model of a mensch as a rabbi, as my father. And I wanted to make sure, especially in times like ours, where public leaders aren't always held to menschlichkeit standards. We don't actually judge whether or not someone should be a leader, it turns out, on if they speak with kindness. But you always have. And so the details were also fun. But what I wanted to say most is that the title that I came up with was a way of pointing to you. And you never point to you. So I'm imagining that there are dimensions of this that are more and less comfortable, and I'm grateful that you said yes to this whole project, let alone to this moment.
When you proposed it, I held my breath. Because you're right. After 40 years being in front, I have enjoyed being back there and being with everybody. Menachem has not, everything he's gotten, I said, take this one to hate. Okay? It was not computers over. But the thing was is that everything I did before coming to Beth-El was on Atari writer, which doesn't translate into IBMs or any other computers. So that stuff has not been accessible yet. We have an ideal project to make it accessible somehow with Rabbi Jeff Jeffrey's help. But on the other hand, but when I worked on a computer, or I typed a hard copy. I never trusted myself to just get up there and give the sermon I wanted to give. Cut out the weeds, be focused, say what I want to say, and say it the way I want to say it. And the voice behind the voice, and will say now publicly, is my wife. Because always in the beginning, and then continuing on, I would give her a copy, and she'd say, do you really want to say that? Or do you want to say it that way? Is that what you wanted to say? And she would be right, and I would then go back and refine it. So, but I never, ever thought about publishing them. I was taken totally by surprise at the gala when you did that one. I'm triply honored because of Moshe's comments and Sierra's comments and Raya's artwork and all the comments from the family. I never thought about my impact on them when I wrote it and when I read it. And clearly it had. And so someone who was fairly unassuming in starting his career never expected to be what it was going to be. Joyce, can I ask you a favor? Can you move the stand away? I see Gail's trying to read. I never. There we go. I saw you poking around it. But I am beyond words and so much honored in terms of what Menachem did on the other paperbacks that were before this one, and everybody that's contributed. Okay, you're on.
Okay. So, one of the things that you have done in your teaching, and I've had a complicated relationship with it, but now I'm very grateful for every second of it, is that you would share messages implicit to us, actually, to me and Yonina and Sierra, and also to our children, woven in to the very public messages. And I learned a lot in each one of those moments, none more so than when you discussed our names. One of the sermons that I refer to in my own teaching now often is how, and you said from Gary to Menachem, but Gary and Ruby to Menachem and Yonina and Sierra, our names are indecipherable in America. And we, at least I, fell into the trap of having a passing name when ordering coffee just to avoid the mistranslation or having to spell my name again, which someone with your name didn't grow up in. And you spoke in the sermon about how intentional that was. You begin with your own ancestor, Gedalia, which is your Hebrew name, then speaking about your Americanized name, Jewish identity, and then the choice the two of you made to give us names that would identify us every second of our existence as Jews. And I'm curious, over the years, but especially, holding the original words, how does that reflect on our existence as Jews in the world? Not mine, and not necessarily yours, but for a Jewish identity to be something that is in the forefront, yet again, of our minds, even when it feels calmer for a second. Recently, it's only for a second. And I'll just share one vignette because it makes the question really poignant and very current. This happened just last week to me. I was flying to Miami, and the plane took a couple minutes to get to the gate. So inevitably, people start to, look around and kvetch about how long it's taking, and right behind me, there's this enchanting conversation. This father is saying to his daughter, "Honey, you gotta wake up." And she said, "I didn't get enough sleep. Can't I just sleep a little bit more?" He said, "How much sleep did you get?" She said, "Only 9 hours." And I look around, and I'm just being social with the guy, and I say, "Oh my God, I know that conversation. We've had that conversation." He said, "Yeah, but," and trigger warning to everybody, "Yeah, but her younger sister, she's a terrorist. Her name is Hannah, we call her Hamas." And then he looks at me, and he sees this necklace, and he saw my kippah, and he says, "Oh, I'm so sorry." Now, he's a good person. He made what I think is a casual mistake with language that has become casually cruel. But the second he saw my identity, something changed. And I think our names, our visible signs, all sorts of things are important in a way that we didn't remember for a little while. So I'm wondering if you would reflect on that, not necessarily names, but with that as the launch.
I got a lot of answers. I'm trying to figure out where to start with it. I began my journey reading, it was a 3-volume or 4-volume history of the children of Israel, something like that. It never got to the Holocaust. It never got to the state of Israel. Right? But at one point, whichever it was, the loss of the people, of the Jewish people from the Holocaust, and the miracle of the birth of the state, but I remember the little state. I don't even think Adima and I ever even talked about it this way. That I saw all of you, I saw our marriage and your births as part of the bigger story of the rebirth of the Jewish people. And all the times that we were able to be present and make our people present. That means our values, our history, our dreams, present. So, when Grandma Nechama died, and then you were born, your name was easy for us to choose and difficult for everybody to pronounce. Thank you for the late Prime Minister Begin, who made it easier for newscasters to figure out how to say it, and then it was easier for Menachem. We reached back into the history of the family for the names of everybody else. And for us, this was our contribution to Jewish history, to the Jewish people. And yes, Because every time I call you call me, Menachem, Moshe, Raya, all the kids' names. I talk to your sisters. I know we did that, but I dreamt of it. To perpetuate strongly, visibly, our people into history.
What I want to do each moment, I've never tried to interview you in front of people.
No, only once we did it on the camera.
Yeah, the camera's very different than not having the it's not luxury, I don't want to misphrase this. The necessary time to let in what you just said, to process it personally, to think about not only how much it's influenced my rabbinate, but also how the names of my children do similar things to me, and we haven't spoken about it in such explicit terms. There's this fascinating thing that I'm wondering how many people in the world could have experienced, which is to review the material of their parent when you follow roughly in their footsteps, and you're like, oh, my dad got that from me. Wait a second. Because there's sometimes this way that through osmosis, even if I wasn't paying close enough attention, I was around a lot of these ideas as I grew. And I want to ask you a question about intuition in particular, because there are things that I came across here that were not text-based and sometimes right at the text, explicitly so. For instance, you wrote in 2001 a very passionate piece called Revenge and Timothy McVeigh. And in it, you go through the textual history where Judaism has not just been reticent, but very judgmental of issuing capital punishment. For even the most heinous crimes, Judaism has been wary of human authority to do such a thing. In Israel's history too, which you also wrote about with Eichmann as the exception, we don't do that. And because of the wanton destruction that American terrorist wrought in a place of government function, killing children and adults and servants, you said, but I want it anyway. And then you said, please God, keep me human. Right? You were delicate even in that pain. I want to ask you about that, especially in light of the last 526 days. Because that is the pain of October 7th, 2023, pushing people of conscience to very complicated emotional places, even where Judaism is so cautious about the uses of power. And we must be. It's powerful to read your words and to feel the raw rage of them, not only in response to that, but any blasphemous desecration of human life makes us that angry on theological terms. They are erasing the image of God. There is a they. I don't like saying those things. Judaism has taught me to not like that. But I still feel what I feel, and so what I'm asking about is where your emotionality and intuition and rabbinate intersect.
I'll first tell you that you should be very happy you were never my keyboard. I poured out my pen to the keyboard. Sometimes I had notes around me. In other words, I had nothing. And I would just go at the keyboard. It's good that I typed it, I wrote those things like that out because I went back to refine it. What you see is the last draft is one that has gone through some work. There had been earlier times that there were conversations not attached to major events about capital punishment. There was a youth organization called Atid, and one of the things we had in that Atid, which I prepared the materials for, was a whole section on capital punishment.
I have the binder.
So you have the binder, okay? It was It was quite a job that a couple of us did. It was college-age USY, and we had a week and we studied. And I prepared the materials for that whole week. But there are times when events happen, and I couldn't, I still don't, detach myself from being a husband, from being a father, from being a grandfather. And then you see events, and you can't be dispassionate. So at that moment, I have everything boiling. I am a boiling cauldron of feelings. And I let it out. I tried to shake it. I can't deny who I am in the essence, which is against capital punishment per se. But when he blew up the Mura building in Oklahoma City, and all those, I let it out other times after Bonnie died. I let it out. I don't remember how loud I screamed in the end, but I knew I let it out to the keyboard. And I said what I wanted to say. So you sit there at the intersection of this feelings of what do I want to say to my congregation, to people I've been knowing for years. You know, we weren't strangers already then. And what do I want to say? What do I want them to feel? How did I want them to process the tension between good Jewish teaching and pain and anger? And if I was going to preach a sermon, which I'm not, Gilman says to me, go do one anyway. About October 7th, I'd be sitting at the same intersection all over again. I never put it into a sermon, and it's probably long out of print, but there is a paperback publication of Roman Vishniak, by Roman Vishniak. He was a photographer that went through Eastern Europe on the eve of the Holocaust. And he has pictures in there of children and adults, but especially children in Cheder, the Hebrew schools. The picture of it, you can feel their holiness from the pictures. You can feel their quest for God in the pictures. And then at one moment, that's all wiped out. So I have a different sermon there. I said that against the fact that I've never been in the army, I've never had a rifle, but I wish I was living back in the 1930s, I would have killed Hitler. And forget for all the other people, but not to destroy our people. And so I have sat at the intersection of, this, that, these are the teachings, and yet in my kishes, there's a truth. And that's how that sermon got in.
You said to me, you were quoting Rod Stewart at my bar mitzvah. Tells you everything you need to know about that moment. And that I remember tells you everything else you need to know about that moment.
Yeah, because your friends were looking at you so much. What are you doing?
And you said, in a song Forever Young, the quote is, for all the wisdom of a lifetime, no one can ever tell. And it is striking to me, over and over, and right now, that clearly in the intuition that you pour out both through your eyes, through your care with words, and to the pattern of your behavior, the pattern of your life. I understand more about myself when you speak that way. And it's not a comfortable self-knowledge, but because of the self-knowledge, because of the discipline that comes with it, it is, I think, possible to live healthily, even with the and yet that you pointed to. I'm going to ask you to read for a second.
Okay.
You reminded me to be grateful that I wasn't your keyboard. You wrote about your keyboard on page 119.
Oh, yeah.
And this is a good one. They're all good ones, but I really like this one. The second to last paragraph, which starts "We all," I would love it. I think everyone would love it. If you'd read from there until the end of the third paragraph on the next page. So it's an extended. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And I invite everyone. Let's see if this works for you as much as I know it's going to work for me. To imagine he's speaking up there, but also at your table, also over coffee, also in your imagination, when something came up, either because my father mentioned it or because something happened in your life, which I know in this room happened and happens many times, and you're able to draw on wisdom that he shared before. Or maybe something lands, this is now me speaking about me, in a way that it didn't before. So I'm asking you, and I'm just going to do it myself anyway, to imagine the different frames in which you've experienced Rabbi Gary Creditor. And hear these words totally fresh.
You know, going back when I was invited, what I was involved with, whatever it was at the time, from the Interfaith Center.
Yeah.
It probably from the Virginia Interfaith Center for Public Policy, which I've been on for eons, to go when President Obama spoke at college in Northern Virginia. And many things about gun violence. We all respond to these questions in our own ways. Some of us pattern ourselves after the rabbis we grew up with, or who were our mentors in school. And I can say to every sermon I've ever delivered, it would be an interesting read. It is. I don't know if the advocates, most, some, or many apply to how many of my colleagues preach from a written text. I nearly always do it. Time out. The one thing I've never written down was my talks to the B'nai Mitzvah. None of them were ever written. They were all extemporaneous on the spot. I even thought I knew what I was going to say, and I changed it. So that I have no records of, except for my children. I nearly always do. It means that I have shaped these words to say exactly what I want to say. It keeps me focused. It allows me to delete, cut, and paste, or insert to make this as a finished product as I possibly can. I commune with my keyboard, as Jackie said. On the other hand, I practice the art of reading a text and talking to you. It inhibits off-the-cuff, spontaneous, and impulsive comments. It restrains passionate outbreaks unless they were pre-planned into the text. Because I prepare sermons by writing them, printing them, reading them, and revising them. I try to put myself in your place as if I was hearing someone else deliver them, and then decide, is that what I want to say, and how I want to say it. Rabbi sermons are quite different from African American preaching. Sometimes I thunder and even hit the lectern. Most times I desire to teach, to illuminate, to share insights and attitudes. I gave up yelling and telling people what to do a long time ago. I still hope to influence people in their thoughts and behaviors, but rather from a posture of reason, learning, values that come from our tradition, rather than banging on the pulpit. In writing sermons, I hope people will agree with me. Even if not, you can still like me. I'd like that. But I don't think of that question when I write sermons. I think of my feelings on the subject. I think about our Jewish treasure house of wisdom. I think of whom we are and what we could do, about the matter, or who we could become, or how we can contribute to society, to the Jewish people, to Israel. My scolding has been couched in my teaching and pointing a direction. I gave up shrieking devout because it was only a good exercise, maybe let me vent, but it didn't change anything. Didn't make anybody change anything. Since teaching is the original calling of the rabbi, and not preaching, my style evolved into that form and format. I do watch an occasional Sunday church service on TV, and know that my preaching is very distant from that of my colleagues in the African American churches, as well as from evangelical ministers of any color. But after sermons that have related to any controversial issue, people have never ceased to let me know their views, especially if they disagreed. I have never inhibited anyone from saying what was on their mind. I have missed many an Old Shabbat or Kiddush because someone wanted to bend my ear. Or maybe it will happen again tonight. You want to comment on that?
Oh, I don't think it needs a comment.
Okay.
No, I think you did what you said you were doing. You chose exactly the words to express how you choose your words.
I'm going to postscript that 2 pieces. My father, may rest in peace, said to me, if you can't say it in 15 minutes, it isn't worth saying. I told him, it doesn't work that way. He let me know, and he was ahead of his time in terms of talking about focus and people can pay attention to you, etc., which is obviously more now than even then. The other was, after I gave, I don't remember which sermon it was, in Massapequa, Long Island. I remember the gentleman who did it. It was probably obviously a good sermon. He came up to me and he took me by my lapels and he said, well, what do you want me to do? But after we were in a very nice excursus, that I didn't tell him what I wanted. Whether it was feeling or doing or questions, I didn't tell him. These things I remembered as my life went on when I came to write. Can I do one thing?
So I think I'm going to ask 2 more questions, and then I think you'll have a chance to have your questions heard, and you should take what my father just read a moment ago as an invitation to bend his ear, but make sure you do it after he already gets outside, after we're done with this part of our program. This is a chance. Rabbi Salston has some index cards if you'd like to write a question. We probably won't get to all of them, but you can share 1 or 2, and we'll see if we can do them together. You and I had, when I started rabbinical school, actually when I started my undergrad, and I took a class with Rabbi Neil Gilman of blessed memory for the first time, who was dean of rabbinical school when you were in rabbinical school, who held you to account as a rabbinical student because I was born,
yes,
and you were distracted.
Yes.
And then became a beloved mentor of mine too. He opened my mind and broke my heart, both of those things many times, when it came to the question of God. He would talk about theology, and I wanted to talk about God, and that says a lot too. So I came home, and we started talking about God. And it's not that you wouldn't talk about God. We, say, Hashem is here, Hashem is there, Hashem is truly everywhere, all the time. That was the warp and woof of my childhood. We always, brachot and singing. I never paid attention, really, in our sublime Shabbat singing, to the implications about God. And you speak passionately. I'm not going to have you read from it, but you made, in the political sphere here, a symbolic statement for equality that the Richmond City Council made in November of 2013 about LGBTQ equality. And you begin with God. I don't know what God wants. It is vital to come with humility and not with certitude. That was your language as a public leader in the public sphere, with the weight of our faith in and surrounding you, especially in the eyes of the larger world. You quote verses like Ela Toldot Adam, these are the generations of Adam, implying that all of humanity, implying that the divine design is to have a varied humanity that looks different, sounds different, talks different, is different. Those who are LGBTQ are just as much related. Now, I don't take issue with any of this. I appreciate so much the theological verve that you offered. But the very next piece that we included here was about holy ground. And soon after that, a question that someone asked you after Bani was killed about is there a God?
Right.
And I don't doubt your belief that there is a God, but I was wondering, al regel achat, on one foot, what does this mean when it comes to God?
Let me start. Then I'll go to anyplace else after this. The purpose of the Richmond City Council, there was a motion made that when gay marriage was permitted illegal in Virginia, then the spouses of the people who worked for the city of Richmond would be eligible for all the benefits, etc., that other married couples could have. So we weren't getting the state to change its law. We were positioning the city of Richmond to be ready to act when it became legal to do. And what you saw me in shul, or if you heard this or that, I was involved in a lot of other things in the city, in different organizations. And there were times when I would get a phone call or a message saying, we're doing this or doing that, are you free? And within my ability to, I always said yes. There were a few people out there not Jewish in different positions in the city that I would always say yes to, unless it was absolutely impossible to. And so I came that night, and I was ready to speak, and one of the minister friends of mine came over to me and said, would you allow me to speak instead of you, instead of me speaking? Because it would make a bigger impression if he did to the constituency, which were all Christians, instead of rabbi lecturing them. So I said, sure. But I said, if I don't like how it works out, I'm sitting behind you. Now I'm going on to talk. I didn't have to. But I came home to write the sermon. What I heard that night was people saying, I know that those people are damned. I know those people should go to hell. I know this, and I know that, and I know this, because God told me so. And so I wrote, I don't know about that. In other places I've written that Torah is his letter to us, and our prayers are our letter back to him. Pardon the pronouns, I just don't like the word it. So that original statement was not to be read as my theory of Torah, but it was really a response. And if you really want to, there's a good West Wing thing where Martin Sheen says, well, if you want them to be killed, well, what about the Sabbath? And it's in there too. What about the Sabbath violators? What about the adulterers? I mean, what about unruly children? And then you can start killing. You can take it literally. If this has got wrong, so let's take it all. She did better than I did.
That was very good.
But that, I had to search. Let me start this way. I felt a feeling for God when I was a kid. Don't ask me why. When I shared that with minister friends, of which I have many, they said that's called calling. I said, okay. I didn't have a language for it. My parents didn't tell me it. I just felt that in the shul I grew up. Small congregation, 125 families, small Hebrew school. And somehow when I first encountered Hebrew language in 4th grade, because the then rabbi made a mistake and waited. I should have started a year earlier, but I touched Hebrew. I used to rewrite. I used to have my own Hebrew dictionary. I used to rewrite it when I got words out of order. I just loved it. I love reading about Jewish history. And I loved the prayers we were saying. I didn't try to put God into a box and figure that out. God just, from my youth, was, and as I continue to grow up, is. And I took the Silverman prayer book our liturgy that grew up with, personally. When I said Baruch Atah, I wasn't just recited the phrase on there, I was speaking to God. And however anybody wanted to conceptualize it. But I felt it personal. I felt it close. And there were times that I didn't want to pray. There were times when, even as rabbi, I didn't want to speak. But I never let go of it. There were times when I was even mad with God when I said, I told him so. You know, and for me it's a good trouble, but I took it seriously for me. Because something didn't fit together, didn't go together. And if you take liturgy seriously in what it says, and then we just walk out the door and get smacked in the face by life, that's really tough. And I struggled through it. But came to embrace a love of God more than the songs on the records. And not only that, as I became so many times in the pulpit rabbinic, with humility I say, God standing, is what a congregant would come to me with their expression of pain, and need help, and need support, need assurance. Even I had a moment of doubt in there. I still had to help them in their journey. So my entire life has been a continuing questioning, experiencing certitude at times. When the moments of certitude, when I held you in my arms, your sisters, Moshe for his bris, Raya the second day when we came to the hospital and held her. All these moments have been moments of certitude. A good sunrise, a good sunset. Just sitting any place with your imam. There are these moments that have absolute certitude in God. You know, tomorrow we'll bring something and I'll have a tussle. I get out of here. How can it be? And then I'll say Baruch Atah. It's not easy. It's so complicated. There never was a theology class at JTS until Seymour Seal, and I was in his first class. Right? It's a long discourse about the seminary, but that's not this is the moment. But there was no theology, and he made us struggle. He was Seymour before Neil Gilman, and he made us struggle. And he said, "You always will if you take it seriously." I don't only have to take it seriously. I had to espouse it. I had to teach something. So that entire process is what I do.
I don't know that my father will hear it as much as you will, but that sounded like grace to me. I hope you'll hear it. There's a story that he told me of his parents, my grandparents, Clara Creditor and Henry Creditor of blessed memory, my Saba and Safta. That when they were dating, they were in a car on the way to the Catskills. And someone turned around to my grandfather and says, "Henry, you're really lucky to be dating Clara. You know that, right?" He says, "Sure. She's got a lot of chaim. You know what that means, right?" And my grandfather says, "Sure, horseradish." You didn't get the joke. Chaim is horseradish. Chaim is grace. So both through the laugh and through the word, chaim is good stuff. And sometimes it gets handed down. The last question I have is not the last question I have. And it's one of those that is demonstrative of everything and tender in a way that nothing else could be. When you reflect on saying Kaddish, and specifically on stopping saying Kaddish, again, this intuition and the channeling of tradition and being who you are very publicly in this way, wearing your heart on the outside, I would say. You say that when you're done saying Kaddish, that is the end of childhood. And I am so grateful to not know what you're talking about. May I never know. But that understanding of childhood is an incredible chiddush. I'd never thought about it in such terms. I've been with other people as they go through it, grateful not to understand. And in this 40-year chunk, which is not everything you wrote, not everyone you wrote to, there's a lot of that. And of course there would be. And I'm wondering, given that in your journey toward the rabbinic, but rabbi you are is also the person you are. There's an integrity that is so, not indistinguishable at every moment, but mostly indistinguishable. This is who you are. I think what I'm asking is, where is the place of your ancestors, our ancestors, in you, now that you are, by every definition, adult, by your standards?
Maybe part of the answer lies in the fact why I'm doing all this genealogy. Reaching back on two of the strands in my family, our family, to the 1700s, from Rabbi Menachem and from Salston. I feel there to be their descendant, and I feel I'm an intermediary when I see you. See Moshe, Ariel, and Ryan, your sisters, and Yana and Mona. I see myself, ourselves, as part of a continuum of life. That piece about saying Kaddish, it was very intense to say Kaddish to Saba. He was 67, he had just retired, and we were living in Long Island, and they could be able to come out and see everybody. I mean, things were really, and then, his sickness and then his death. And I'm the family rabbi, his father, his husband, Abbah, husband, etc. And brother, and with your niece and nephew. It wasn't so much taking care of affairs, because my mother took care of all affairs. But you learned as a child, we had a colleague, the Baruch Rabbi at the time, who always called his eldest son the Kaddish. Kaddish is the oldest son who's going to be out, give one, responsible for making sure Kaddish is said morning, noon, and night. It's a terrible burden to be labeled that way. But I assumed, as well as the Baruch, by the way, he was also very faithful, very faithful. The feeling of saying Kaddish as many times as I could. There's a concept about the Igui Nishama, the enlightenment. It's not Buddhism. But the enlightenment of the soul by as many times as you say Kaddish. You enabled the Neshama to rise towards God. I have no idea what that English means. I know what the English says, but I don't know what it means. All right? You can do theology all you want, but what does it really mean in reality? We have to get to the other side and we'll find out that. But now I have no idea what it means. But I know that it's a tradition. So I embraced saying Kaddish for my father as much as I could. Even when the Kaddishes are not the morning Kaddish, Chatzi Kaddish, Kaddish Shalem, Kaddish Rabbanah, give me a Kaddish I'd say. I was so upset. There was one day that summer we were in Ramah, and I didn't realize that there was not going to be a meeting in camp because everybody went on a trip. It was the day, one day in camp, that everybody goes out of camp. And that's the day they don't have meeting. I was beside myself. I ran around trying to find a meeting. You know? And then all of a sudden, you come to the end of Kaddish. It's, on one occasion, it's falling off a cliff. It's over. But you don't have to live. Because when you're over, you're no longer the child saying Kaddish. You're now the adult. And so I didn't want to finish saying Kaddish. Because it is in me, maybe others. I enjoyed not being the oldest generation. I didn't want to be the oldest generation. And then I was. That was a tough trip. And that came out in that summer. So, but it is part of growing up. And what I try to share from the pulpit with everybody who will be here to hear was my journey of growing up. Because we're all growing up, so we're all on a journey. Whether it sounds different, whatever, but we're all growing up. And therefore, I thought to share that growing up with everybody I was with and everybody I loved. That was you. I want to put it here that when I came to rabbinical school, that Sukkot, in the intermediate days of Sukkot, Max Arts was vice chancellor, and he would host the incoming rabbinical school students to a luncheon in the seminary circle. There were only, in those days, there were only men in rabbinical school. So I phrased it the way I phrased it, quoting him, and he said, boys, there's only 3 sermons to make. I don't remember what the first 2 was. The third one was on Israel. And when I left lunch that day, I said, I'm in trouble. I got 3 sermons and I'm done. That's the rest of my career. What do I say? It took me a while. I really had to just work on to the idea of sermons altogether. But once I got it, I then knew that I wanted to share my feelings, my reactions, and sometimes what I wanted people to do, whether it was Soviet Jewry or Shabbos or Kashrut or whatever it might have been. And that's what I found that I wanted to say. But part of that experience was what I shared as well. I'm glad I did.
We're glad you did it. I'm so not done with these questions, but I want to make space because you might have had some questions that you wanted to ask, and we might not have time for all of them, but it's a chance for us to think together. So, what do we do, Rabbi? What do we do?
I feel like so much of what folks have asked really addressed. With that growth and growing up, how do you function with the reality that these same 3 sermons, that these same words about very difficult topics still have resonance in our party lives? We're still talking about capital punishment. We're still talking about the connection between Timothy McVeigh and October 7th. How do you live in that?
You know, it struck me in reading the book. I've gone through it 3 times. How many of the different sermons I could give the same sermon today. Like I say, the fight's not over. The fight's not over. The issue of equality in this country, we have taken terrible steps backwards. For the handicapped in this country, we've taken a step backwards. The divisions between parts of society, I've tried to understand. I tried sometimes in one of the sermons, I said, I don't want to talk about a melting pot. Because in a melting pot, you lose who you are, become some other conglomerate. No, we're I forget what I call it. Not a melting pot. No, not a something else. But we maintain our identities even as we come together as society. All right? And now we find the shredding of society. All right? So it just means we've got to sweep harder. We've got to work more. I gave one sermon in the interim before you took over about, if we've got to go march in the street, we're going to go march. I marched before, I'll march again. I wasn't old enough to be in Selma, but I've been in other places. I remember taking you were on a tricycle with a rope around the front of the tricycle, and around the other end around my waist, and we walked for Soviet Jewry. And one of the sermons I said there, I don't know if I can make that one here, that I was arrested for Soviet Jewry. Right? It's not over. I'm sorry it's not over. I really wish we won some of those battles. We didn't just win the battle, we won the war. No. We won some battles, and we're still fighting for them.
What was the hardest debar you never wrote, or that you wrote and never gave?
The hardest sermon?
You planted it.
I didn't know whether this was going to be good.
He's been waiting for this one.
I have been, I don't want to use the word privileged. I've just been the rabbi at the time of different tragedies, whether it was the from the spacecraft that blew up, the challenge was two of them, whether it was 9/11, there were times that I was just spinning my rabbinic times. I wish I had something more prosaic to be able to talk about, but I have all of these things. You can always tell when I wrote something, this is on the target line. In the spring of 1987, 4 teenagers committed suicide in a car. That's the exhaust, and they killed themselves. Entire New York, New Jersey area was just distraught, and the pain across all communities was immense. So that Shabbat I could not avoid speaking. So I'm not going to be there the whole thing by no stretch. I express my utter amazement about how anybody can do this, etc. I talk about how Judaism is against suicide because of how we see the beauty of life, how we have a sense of more important than God in our lives. And then I got to the end of the sermon. And this is what I wrote. This was probably the hardest thing I ever had to deliver in all the sermons. My last point is personal, being a father and a rabbi. You always have to hear the heart. That's in quotes. Do we kiss our children goodnight or goodbye? Do we hold their hand and wipe their tear, regardless of age? Do they know that when they cry out in the night, awake or asleep, that we will be there? Will our children have the confidence to confide in us? Will we, the parents, make the transition to being their friend? Will we hear their hearts? No matter how old they grow, we will always be their mother and father. No matter how old we grow, they will always be our children. Yet despite our best intentions, sometimes that doesn't work. Where do they go? I found it obvious and also disturbing that these teenagers never turned to their church, to a pastor or priest. I can't analyze their particular situation, but I would like to use this opportunity to proclaim loudly and strongly that our synagogue loves our children, regardless of age. That our synagogue cares for our children, no matter where they are. That in these precincts, they can find love and understanding, an ear, a hand, and a shoulder. They don't have to search the world for a friend. We are here. They don't have to think that they're alone. They're not. Born as a place of sacrifices, developed as a house of study, the synagogue serves at our times as a refuge for the weary, a sanctuary for the troubled. That place where young and old can find the divine spark that gives meaning to life and thus gives peace. I would use all of you as emissaries of that message so that we might spare our people such a calamity or tragedy. That is the heart of sin. I agree.
Friends, here's what I want to suggest. First, let's take a breath. We're squeezing in decades of sacred wisdom and personal experience into a very compact space and time. Thanks for giving us the chance to do this with you.
I have to thank you for publishing the first one, the second one, the third one. I think there was only two. No, there was a third one. There's three in between from the gala, and now this. And for your questions. And not only do I thank you, but I thank your sisters for the gift of life that Ima and I have so beautifully shared.
Friends, I'm going to ask you to do something very simple, but very present with me. Just shine a little bit of love on my father with your eyes for a second. And make him look at you. He's uncomfortable, but make sure he meets your eyes. Look around the room. This Torah is very alive, and you've given it to us. And so I know that you'll all join me in acknowledging someone who is the embodiment of manifest decency, my father, Rabbi Gary Creditor. I think the plan is for us to make our way into that space, the beautiful space, for some refreshments, some book signing, and some more sweet and uncomfortable moments for my father. Thank you, Rabbi Salston, for helping this happen. Thank you for the committee for making this happen. Thank you, everyone.